Hey folks, EJS here from Thrivality, and I want to record a quick introduction on why you should listen to this podcast. So first, it's with Steven Wright, who's the co-founder of the SCD Lifestyle website that was dedicated to helping people with digestive issues. That morphed into Healthy Gut Company, which makes products around digestive enzymes, tributyrin, and HCl. But recently, Steven and his team added a product called HoloImmune, which addresses immune system imbalances. And so what we cover in the podcast today is really just kind of taking it from the top of, why did he create this product called HoloImmune? What is the immune system and where is it located? We've often heard that 80% of it is in the gut, but it's made up of two branches. And so it goes into the adaptive immune system and the innate immune system and kind of how they play off each other. They're called TH1 and TH2. And what causes some of the imbalances that we deal with today, how it can help with upper respiratory issues as well as skin issues, how this product can. And where folks tend to run into problems with the various imbalances there, and how HoloImmune differs from traditional immune system support like vitamin C and quercetin and zinc and acetylcysteine, and how it can also complement things, right? Those things. You still need vitamin C, for example, and then how it impacts upper respiratory, skin issues. We even get into how it can help, or it certainly doesn't hinder traditional gut support products and things like that. And then we get into obviously how what's in here, right? Because it's something called a ParaProbiotic. So it's these young probiotic strains they take. They're heat cured, so they're not actually living, but that changes the cell structure and how it interacts with the receptor sites in our gut. So it's a really fascinating podcast. If you want to jump right to the website, you go to healthygut.com and use the code THRIVE15. That's THRIVE 15 for 15% off at healthygut.com. So enjoy the podcast and leave any questions in the show notes. Thanks. All right. Hey, folks, this is EJS from Thrivality.com, and I am excited to have Steven Wright from Healthy Gut back on the podcast today. Steven was the co-founder of the SCD Lifestyle website, which really offered guidance to people around nutrition and how they could optimize their gut health. Steven, over time, began to recognize that there were gaps sort of in the gut supplement market, and he and a friend co-founded healthygut.com, or the SCD Lifestyle became Healthy Gut. And I use their products every day, right? So I use Holozyme, 2 of these. I use 1 tributyrin in the morning, which is the short chain fatty acids, and then 2 HCl guard. Literally with every meal I take, I don't leave the home without them. I travel with them. And I really have found them to be, over the past year, the better part of a year, to be really next level. But we're not here to talk about those today. We're here to talk about a relatively new product that Steven and his team have introduced, and it's called HoloImmune. So, Steven, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me back, Eric.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you here again. So, why did a gut company create this product? What was sort of the need that you saw?
Yeah, it was born out of the pandemic. I wanted to have the best health possible because in the early days we didn't know that much, and my fiance was in cancer treatment at the time. Of other people in my family with suppressed immune systems, and so I was searching in March and February before it was like the toilet paper scare. I was already on this and I was concerned, and I had, you can look at blog posts I did back in like 2013, 2014 that were like super high dose D, A, zinc, various mushrooms, all kinds of just, adaptogens for the immune system.
Mm-hmm.
And I pulled out that stuff and it still was not like satisfying enough for me. And so then I started looking into the research about upper respiratory tract infections and like what had research on it. And of course, I happened just to look through the gut as my lens to view the world. And I kept coming across these things called ParaProbiotics, which had been studied for upper respiratory tract infections and provided some benefit in human trials. And so this kept, I kept finding them and I'm like, okay, this is really weird. So then I just started digging deeper into like, hey, is there something going on in the gut immune area? Like, if everybody's focused over here on these building blocks of our immune system or these modulators of our immune system, are we missing an entire area of immunity in the gut that maybe we could modulate something or increase or do something in there that would provide universal benefit across the body? And so that's where I got excited about paraprobiotics. I got excited about like trying to understand how the gut interplays with the immune system. And it kind of just really, I'm no immunologist yet, but it really blew open my world around understanding food sensitivities, histamine related issues, neuroinflammation related issues, and just this idea that like I was thinking about the immune system all over the body, but the truth is that 80% of it's right in the core, right around your intestines. And so if you were trying to deliver something to interact with your immune system, you would deliver it through the gut.
Fascinating. So you saw this gap in the market where most people were focusing on things that modulate basically the immune system. So echinacea, zinc, quercetin, and acetylcysteine. Like that's kind of my go-to list, right? When I think about the immune system, traditionally, vitamin D, those are the things that, I go to and are very common in the market, right?
Yeah. And so I found these studied paraprobiotics and I wanted them. I wanted them for myself. I wanted them for my family. And there was only one that was commercially available that I could get my hands on. And this, I was looking at research on like 4 or 5 of them. And so that kind of was like annoying. Like I don't like to be told no if there's benefit and it makes sense to me. And so that's kind of where the project got kicked off.
Very, very helpful. And so just what is the definition of a paraprobiotic? What does that mean?
Yeah. So, and I think this is important. I'm having to reiterate this over and over again. So it's important. So prebiotics are the food for your bugs. Probiotics are studied strains of typically live bacteria that are shown to be helpful for humans. Paraprobiotics are heat-killed, immature probiotics. So in other words, when they're culturing and creating the probiotics, it's an adult, usually live probiotic cell. A paraprobiotic is killed earlier in its life cycle with heat. And what that does is it makes it so it has a different cell membrane and different cell membrane receptors. And that's the key, because that change, while subtle, produces definitely big time outcome change in humans. And that's the cool thing about paraprobiotics is apparently we're essentially feeding different information through these receptors and through these cell membrane components to the immune cells in our gut. And that modulates things and sort of helps support various pathways.
Super, super interesting. I want to get to the method of action further on. So let's talk a little bit about the immune system, and maybe I'm just going to try and share my screen here, because I think on your website you've got a really helpful diagram that talks about the immune system, right? And what it is and where it is. And so, I understand it as TH1 and TH2, or innate immunity and adaptive immunity. But walk the listener through basically this diagram and describe the immune system.
Yeah. So basically, you have the innate. The two biggest, broadest classifications of the immune system are the innate immunity, which you see there in the blue, and the adaptive immune system, which you see there in the orange. And the innate immunity is like inflammation, whether it's a stomach bug or a rolled ankle or a cut, a paper cut or something like that's natural killer cells, mast cells, white blood cells, and it's non-specific. It's just rushing in to handle whatever the injury is. Something has to communicate from the innate immune system over to the adaptive. Like something has to say, hey, something's happening over here. We're going to maybe need to crank out some antibodies. And so the dendritic cells are the most primarily the biggest connector, if you will, between the two, and you can see them there in the middle, and they basically pass information over to your B and T cells, who then start to spit out more specific adaptive related immune support, whether that's antibodies or different types of cytokines, different types of interferons. It gets really complex, and even I'm still a novice trying to understand the adaptive immune system at its all the cytokines and everything that's going on there. But in general, I think what happens is we start to think about like, I want a strong immune system. And that's what I thought too. I'm like, literally my whole life, I was like, I want a strong immune system, because if it's strong, then maybe bad things won't happen to me. Unfortunately, as you can see from this diagram, there's a lot of components. And in general, when we start talking about TH1 and TH2, what people are starting to describe are when the immune system gets out of balance. And if you start from a place of out of balance, like if you start walking, let's say you're going to walk the dogs and one of your shoes has a little pebble in it and you're out of balance, by the time you get back from that walk, your foot is going to be in a lot of pain. So if we take a out of balance immune system and then we dump a bunch of vitamin C and zinc and vitamin D and elderberry, whatever your choice of those modulators is, there's no guarantee that we're not causing a bigger blister or a bigger issue. And so that's where I've become extremely excited and extremely focused with this product. And in general, is how do we basically give adaptogenic support so both sides of this equation are balanced and are healthy, not just strong.
Yeah, I think that's really, really, really important, because you don't want an overreactive, immune system. I mean, one of the problems with people who have more complex illness, they get so you've got mast cells on the left side of this diagram. They get mast cell activation syndrome, right, where it's too strong and it's producing too many mast cells, and that creates all kinds of problems. So I think you're right. We want to modulate, we want to balance the immune system, so it's strong but regulated.
Yeah, and I
Balanced.
think it's in balance. So how another way I like to describe it, and I think analogies are really helpful for this because it is quite the complex orchestra, if you will, is we want our immune system and our body to use a feather if a feather is needed, and we want it to use a hammer if a hammer is needed. But we don't want to get those mixed up. We don't want the tools doing different jobs. If it's supposed to be a screwdriver, please, immune system, don't use a hammer, because it's going to cause extra damage to the cells around it or the neurons or wherever that issue is happening. And so we want tolerance with our world, whether that is a allergen from the tree or the grass or a bug, a virus or a bacteria or something. We want to have the right sort of tool for the job and the right tolerance to that tool.
Yeah, that's a great way to explain it. Okay, so let's shift to some ways that immune systems can get dysregulated, right? And on your website, you've got a great list of these 5 common malfunctions, right? You can have someone who's underactive, right? It's too passive on the sort of the innate side, or it's overactive, like too aggressive on the innate side. So this would be like mast cell activation syndrome, right? Yep, that'd be a good one. You've got poor communication between the two branches. Or you've got, underactive adaptive or overactive adaptive, where it's, too destructive. So walk us through each of these.
Yeah. So, underactive innate immunity is typically seen in like super immunocompromised individuals or elderly folks. This is where you can't even mount the appropriate fever or the appropriate infection response, natural killer cells, to just a generalized aggression to the body. That's typically in pretty sick people or elderly. Like you said, the overactive innate immunity is when those cells rush in to do their job, but they don't get the communication to stop, right? They go back to your locations or whatever, stop attacking the cut or the ankle or whatever it is. And so this can be things like mast cell activation. This can be just chronic inflammation. There's nothing turning off that, those cytokine storms or something like that. So that one seems to be, more prevalent to some degree in the chronic health world. Poor communication between the two sides. This is like where you have like maybe a dendritic cell issue, or something called plasmacytoid dendritic cells, which we can talk about a little bit more later. But this is where it's sort of disorganized, where maybe you react some days, you don't react other days. Maybe you're picking up autoimmune conditions year over year. There's sort of a mix up of the communication about what's a real threat and what's not a real threat. The underactive adaptive immunity, I call this one not smart enough. This again happens in really depressed immune systems and elderly folks. There's plenty of studies on why, for instance, certain sort of inoculations against elderly people don't work as well. And one of the reasons why is they just aren't able to form the right B cell and T cell antibody sort of formation processes. And so that's a real issue there. And then overactive is typically this is where you get into autoimmunity, right? It's trying to create antibodies towards everything that it sees. Basically your dendritic cells and everything that's happening on the one side is passing the information over, and everything that is getting classified as a bad guy. And we have to make antibodies against everything, celiac or Hashimoto's, or the other 100+ autoimmune conditions. And so we can have any of these five. I think in general, what we see, unless you're able to run, like Cyrex Labs has the best I think immune panel out there, and unless you have access to that panel, which I think is like $500 or $600, you can't really look at your B cell counts, your T cell counts, your natural killer counts. Like, you have really no ability to see into the window of which one of these might be happening for you, other than trying to match your symptoms and your pattern of your life to these sort of disorganized ways of being.
Super, super helpful. So why do you think we have these common, malfunctions of the immune system? What sort of drives these kinds of problems?
I think it's the same things that drives pretty much all chronic health issues, and this is just caught up in part of the process. So, this is, I don't know that the immune system's really in the driver's seat. I think it's always kind of reacting to the world around it. And so, some people, maybe shouldn't be eating gluten and grains because it causes inflammation. If you're causing inflammation on a regular basis and you can't turn that inflammation at the gut level off, you're going to start to have, maybe some shutdown of those inflammation pathways, right? Your body's going to start getting used to this level of inflammation, or be unable to shut it off. And so, based on your genetics, your diet, maybe you get in a car crash, you hit your head, maybe you go through a stressful divorce, that can trigger any one of a number of breakages. And I think it's the immune system kind of just gets caught up in it. I don't know that there's a certain trigger for each of the five, if you will.
Yeah. Stressors can knock the body out of balance, and I think modernity too can be a big factor, right? We're just faced with so many things in our modern environment. I liken it to a cup, right? And you can only fit so many things in the cup. If you have too many inputs, it begins to overflow, like cytokine storms. It's something triggers that, and the body goes, on a run. Mast cell activation is another one, right, where people just can't get their systems balanced. And I tend to think, my intuition is it comes from a lot of the things that you've described, but also just the challenge of being in a fairly toxic environment.
We have more chemicals than ever. We don't move nearly enough. We don't go out in the sun enough. We're stressed out by the world around us all the time, and social media and news and all these things. And so that, combined with, some underactive or not the best choices of diet, things like that, and you start to stress, and everybody has weak links. So it just kind of depends on where yours are and which ones break.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit then about the ingredients and the method of action here. So you list out these ingredients, and I know you're an engineer, you're by training. That's how you think. So you went back and you did this research, you sourced these ingredients. You gave a little bit of an intro on what they are, but let's go deep on each one and what they do.
Yeah. So, just to help people characterize where this product helps, or how it might be different than other immune products out there, in general, If you're talking about D or zinc or C or selenium or things like this, I liken those to like those are the raw materials of, I don't love this analogy, but war. We could use war. The other one I'm trying to use is flying an airplane. Like you need engines, you need people on the airplane, you need wings, you need wheels. All that stuff is important for getting from New York to San Francisco. You got to have the zinc, you got to have the copper, you got to have all these raw materials for the immune system work. If you are missing a wing on an airplane, bad things happen for that thing. The same thing is true if you're low in zinc, you're low in C. Where ParaProbiotics come in and where the gut immune interaction comes in is basically the pilots and the flight plan. Somebody's got to be in control of all this machinery and like guiding it to the right destination and making corrections when things go a little sideways, which inevitably, this is life, there's always going to be a bump or two. And so ParaProbiotics are helping the guidance systems in, I think, in the best way or the easiest way to understand this for your immune system. And so each one of these ParaProbiotics was chosen because they modulate certain parts. So for instance, the L92 ParaProbiotic, it helps modulate TH1, the TH1 side, which again, in TH1 dominant folks in the chronic health world, we think of those people as having environmental allergies, maybe dog or cat allergies. That's what we see in the research. TH2 dominant folks are typically autoimmune related folks. I think it's pretty rare to find somebody who has autoimmune condition who also doesn't have some sort of like grass or pollen reaction or some sort of food reaction. So I think that actually more like a teeter-totter. Everyone's kind of focused on putting a label on these folks, and I think their T cell side is just teeter-tottering back and forth. And so if we can balance that side, I think we can help both individuals. And so that's what I did with the L92 and the LP20. The L92 modulates the TH1 side a little up and down, and the LP20 modulates the TH2 side. And then the Immuse is sort of the connector that can modulate either side, as well as the innate side of the immune system. And so they sort of all play together because there was a lot of fear, I think, on my part about what happens if we exacerbate someone's TH2 dominance or their TH1 dominance. Like I wouldn't want to create a product like that. And so I tried to choose strains that had mechanisms of actions that might interplay with whatever someone's struggling with.
Super helpful. So let's go back to the method of action. You talked about how you've taken these young probiotics, they've been heat treated, so they're no longer active, right? That's why you call them ParaProbiotics.
Right.
And that changes the nature of the cell, and then that does something in the cell-to-cell communication. So go a little bit deeper on what actually is going on there.
Well, I think we're all still trying to figure it out. But in general, what we know so far is that the cell membranes of, for instance, the live lactic acid bacteria versus the heat-killed immature ones have different cell receptors and cell membrane makeup. And so those cell receptors tend to trigger certain things inside of our gut and our immune system. And the membrane, like you said, they're all pieces of data, right? It's sort of like we're feeding the immune system a little bit different type of data with the makeup of the cell membrane. And so that tends to go in certain pathways. And so in this case, I don't know that they have totally figured out like this interlocks and this hooks up and does this. But what we can say is that the L92, like I said, tends to favor a TH1 increase, and the LP20 tends to favor a TH2 increase. Both of them tend to create more T regulatory cells, which help balance the teeter-totter, make it so it's not as volatile. And then the Immuse interacts with the immune system in some way that increases plasmacytoid dendritic cells. And these PDCs are kind of a new class of immune cell that tend to be more of a leadership role or like a communication role. They can send out more natural killer cells if that's needed. They can stimulate more T cells and B cells if that's needed. And so they're kind of more of like a governor. And so that's how the Immuse strain appears to work at this point.
Interesting. Is there any source of these kinds of these cells? You talk about the ParaProbiotics in nature. Like, would you normally get these if anywhere in nature?
I mean, I would assume so. Like, so they're dead, so they're immature, so they got killed at some point through
Mm.
heat or sunlight. Like, let's say that you're playing around in the soil, something was growing. Maybe there was like a lactic acid ferment that was happening somewhere, and then it died, and that's on the skin or the part of the vegetable or something. I don't know. I
Yeah.
think you would have to be foraging potentially.
Yeah.
The beta glucans you could find in mushrooms. You could find it, ours comes from baker's yeast. So any sort of like yeast you ran into in the wild potentially. But yeah, I think you'd have to be really like amazing, or we'll have to find out some crazy thing in like 10 years about where they're located in nature. I'm not real sure yet.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting question. I always try to think like, where are we separated from the, nature and the environment we were supposed to be in? Okay. Um, so do these products marry well with traditional immune support, the quercetin, the vitamin C, the vitamin D? It doesn't replace them, right? It seems like it's an adjunct to.
Yeah. It doesn't replace them unless uh I mean, talk with your doctor, be an informed DIYer or whatever you identify as. So for instance, we have folks who take it and they have mast cell activation, and it seems to dampen their histamine responses. It seems to help them with various foods, things like this. And so they might take less quercetin if they were taking mega doses of quercetin in order to inhibit mast cell activation. And so does it replace them? No. May it reduce your dependence on other modifiers for your immune system? The answer is yes, according to our customer feedback. But in general, like I said, it's not gonna replace low selenium or low zinc or low vitamin D or low vitamin A or low
Yeah.
C. All these things are needed for a great immune system as well, a smart immune system. HoloImmune is more like the guidance once you have all of that raw material.
Yeah, super helpful. I like that, the flight plan, the pilot analogy. Yeah, that you gave previously. Okay. Um, so you talk a little bit about, I mean, immunity and respiratory issues have been top of line for folks. So let's talk a little bit about how does it help with respiratory, skin issues. My wife tends to have, skin rashes and things like that. So let's talk a little bit about how it can help with those two things.
Yeah, so I mean, I think one way to describe these things again is sort of like I'm more of a visual learner and a visual person. And the gut is sort of the first experience of these things. And then they pass information from the gut to the immune system. And then the immune system goes out to the rest of your body. There's an immune system in your lungs, in your brain, in your skin, everywhere. So the reaches of the immune system are very vast after it comes in contact with the gut. And what these raw ingredient makers have done is they've started to run studies on various like interactions with the immune system. So L92 has been studied in kids as well as adults with eczema, and they've shown less like rashes and less sores and things like that over a 8-week time frame. Like it gets better every week over 8 weeks. There's been studies from all three of the manufacturers on less lost work days due to sickness. There's been studies in the various especially with the LP20 for influenza, sort of like if you give influenza to certain mice and you give it to others, like how well and how active are the mice? And the mice who get the ParaProbiotics are more active. They exhibit less symptoms of that. It's also been studied in the humans for influenza, and they see like quicker return to work, less symptomology, things like that. So it doesn't cure anything, it doesn't treat anything. It appears to just support your natural immunity to recover or deal with whatever the injury is. And so when you have the misfires, you'll have things like rashes that are unexplainable. The dermatologist can't really explain them to you. There's not a lot of patterns. You'll have these ongoing eczema reactions and things like this. And if we can tone down that out of balancedness, it appears for not everyone, but some people, you can get a reduction in that symptomology by just like dampening the out of balance immune reaction that's happening in the gut.
Yeah, super helpful. So it's basically modulating the immune system and helping the rest of the body adapt to its environment, adapt to the input, and modulate the respiratory and the skin responses to the environment. What about traditional gut issues like SIBO, SIFO, IBS? I mean, I know you've got products here that I take every day that I love that help with gut, but how does a paraprobiotic help or not help with traditional kind of gut issues?
Yeah, so it's not going to hurt any of those treatments or any of those issues. And in my opinion, it's only going to help. You would have to just test the product and find out if it's particularly helpful for your condition. And the reason why is one of the reasons you're in a situation with a chronic gut infection is your immune system, your defenses are down, and they're not able to just allow you to live naturally. And so, if we're going to improve our immune responses, make them smarter, that's going to help with any sort of killing program you're on or any sort of defense program to try to ward off a reinfection or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, that's helpful. What about tight junction function, right? I mean, when the immune system's overreactive, it breaks those tight junctions down, you get leaky gut. And
The products and the ingredients themselves have not been studied per se. I haven't seen anything that says like this helps with tight junction function specifically, but I don't believe it's going to hurt either.
yeah. Okay. What about some of the complex folks out there? Part of my passion and mission is to help those that have dealt with Lyme or mold because it's quite a crazy journey. I mean, and when you have Lyme, your immune system gets completely scrambled. The spirochetes hide themselves. Any data or customer experience, on that front in terms of relieving symptoms, helping people feel better?
Not specifically on Lyme that I can speak to. We do have a large percentage of our customer base that identifies as having mold issues, and they seem to tolerate the product very well. I know
That's
there's
great.
sometimes there's a lot of consternation around the sourcing of the ingredients and whether or not they'll react to them. You can always open the capsule and do a sprinkle or whatever, but in general, most people do not react to this, even the mast cell folks. And what I would say is, again, as part of a proper protocol from your provider, it could be helpful. And in general, what we see is whether you identify as Lyme or mold or GI or whatever your issue is less reactivity to the things you're struggling. So if you're struggling to add foods to your diet, if you're struggling to adapt to new environments, like you can't go to hotels, you can't leave your residence because you have to have everything so buttoned down mold wise that you literally cannot interact with the world in a normal way. This product seems to allow people to interact with the world in a more normal way.
Yeah, that's really fantastic. I mean, I think people who are healthy don't necessarily appreciate what people go through when your immune system becomes dysregulated or you have Lyme and mold. Like you become, reactive to everything, and can be really sensitive. And sort of the limbic system then starts to get involved and it starts to ratchet things down. So then you've got the immune system is dysregulated, and the limbic system becomes dysregulated. People can go through quite a spell on untangling and unboxing this. So it's great to have a tool in the tool chest to kind of help modulate things, slow it all down. You're gonna be okay. You can travel. Um, cool. So let's talk about how people would get started with this. Like, give some guidance to people maybe who are sensitive. Where they start versus someone who's just doing okay but wants to modulate their immune system.
Yeah. So, obviously, if you're super sensitive and you have to start with sprinkles of something else, please open the capsule and start with sprinkles of HoloImmune as well to just slowly, increase your body's awareness of these compounds. So most people will start with like a half capsule or a quarter capsule if that's how sensitive they are. These capsules have been studied at up to 5 times the dose that's in our product. Just one of them. This is the only product in the marketplace, and this is the first time it's ever been done where we've combined all three together. But one of the LP20 was studied at 5 times the trademark dosage, which is what the rest of the studies were, and they didn't have any severe adverse reactions. That's not a sensitive population, but that's just to say that there's potential to increase the dosage. L92 has been studied at 5 or 6 times its dosage that's in the product as well. So the dosages are exactly what has been studied. And these companies have also done aggressive dosing studies in order to try to find out if there's a limit to how much you can modulate or interact with the immune system. And so far, the data seems pretty tolerable. That being said, anybody could react to this. and we have given refunds for people who do just can't tolerate it. So we're happy to do that. That's why we have our refund guarantee, and we know that every individual circumstance requires individual variation, and we're not going to stand in your way if it's just not for you.
Yeah. Yeah, I've tolerated the product very well. I've been on it for over a month. I increased it recently this week to 2 per day. I seem to be doing really fine. I'm going to be traveling internationally in 3 weeks, so I'm very excited to have a tool like this in my arsenal when I'm going to be in a aluminum tube for 8 hours, and so yeah, I'm really excited to have this in the arsenal. So any words of advice for people, in terms of getting started and having experience with it? Start slow, work up slowly. Any other words of advice for folks?
I mean, it seems to work really well for women over 40 who have some brain fatigue and brain fog. So there's a growing population of those people that are taking it and loving it. It seems to work really well for people with rashes or unexplained food sensitivities. They've tried even some of our products like Tributyrin and other things that help with leaky gut, but they're still struggling with tolerance to grasses, pollens, and foods. And like you said, start slow and don't be afraid to try 1 or 2 a day. A lot of people do find better benefit at 2 a day. Other people are just great at 1. So, just play around. And if you're super sensitive, go slow.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, is there anything that I should have asked you, but I didn't?
I mean, it's a great question. I can't think of, the one person who might take this. Is there any people who shouldn't take this product? And the answer is not that I'm aware of. We don't have any conclusions yet about any specific demographics that don't do well. And then in case people are wondering, for people who have those imbalances in it and they have those experiences, you should start to notice things in 1 to 2 weeks. Now, there is a group of people who don't seem to have a lot of imbalances, and they will notice things like when the rest of the workplace gets sick, maybe they don't get sick, things like that. So
yeah. Awesome. Well, Steven, I've got to wrap it. I know you've got a hard stop soon as well. Thanks so much for being on the podcast. People can visit healthygut.com and use the discount code THRIVE15 for 15% off. I highly recommend this as well as the other products. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Eric.
Did you know that your immune system has 2 branches, TH1 and TH2, innate and the adaptive system, and that 80% of your immune function resides in your gut? However, the immune system can become dysregulated either through stress, illness, life events, things like that. And also you can develop poor cell-to-cell communication. So in other words, things can become dysregulated. Now, traditional immune support like vitamin C, zinc, quercetin, N-acetylcysteine, echinacea, things like that, elderberry, those are all great. Those are ingredients that your immune system can use to do its job. But what if the flight plans have gotten a little bit scrambled? Well, there's a way to deal with that now, right? There's a new kid on the block that's a new class of immune support that actually targets the gut where 80% of the immune function resides. And it's called HoloImmune. And it's a new class of product because it's a ParaProbiotic. So these are strains of young probiotics that have been heat treated and killed. And so that changes the cellular nature and how they communicate with the cells in the gut. And so it really basically modulates the immune system and rebalances TH1 and TH2 and enables better cell-to-cell communication. I've had great results with this product. I take 2 every day, with my breakfast. I feel more energy. I feel more balanced. So this is a great addition to your immune support, and I think it's worthy of you giving it a try. You can visit healthygut.com and use the discount code THRIVE15 for 15% off your order for HoloImmune or any of the Healthy Gut products. Thanks and enjoy.